at those beautiful clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, look up in the sky, yeah, me can see clear. Blue skies are gold and white. Lines up here, them say it's natural. Me now believe them. Them say it's vital, and I listen to them. Something strange is going on. Feel it in my heart, sensing something strong. Gotta save the future, put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it our best can. Stand around and be blind to the fast can. Taking no more, how can we relax? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, living on earth, we must respect the earth. Human and animal, we all deserve the right to peace and opportunity. But nowadays we are blind, we can't.
This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for the week of Saturday, October 4th, 2014. I have Greg Allen with us today. Russ Danner, as always, we'll get to Q&A and calls in a few minutes. Quick update. Same scenarios continue around much of the country. A virtual bullseye of heat on California, which media doesn't talk about much. In fact, in Northern California, next 2 days, we're supposed to top out somewhere near 105 degrees. And you simply don't hear that talked about on the media much. They want to talk about where it's cold because that helps to sell geoengineering. And a lot of people are buying that in the continental U.S., where much of the geoengineering efforts are focused. In fact, if one looks at the NOAA maps, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration maps, it's astounding how often there are virtual bullseyes of cold in the same regions and virtual bullseyes of heat in the same regions, typically smack over California. In fact, if anybody wants to see one of these maps, they can look at the upper right-hand column of recent on geoengineeringwatch.org. You'll see a map I posted yesterday. It's typical. People think I'm posting the same map over and over for weeks and months at a time. It's not the same map. It's just the same scenario over and over and over, while the entire meteorological community scratches their heads and talks about the, quote, ridiculously resilient ridge over California that they can't explain. Completely unprecedented. They can't explain it because they're omitting the largest piece of the puzzle in regard to climate disruption of all. And again, not to say that there are not many, many, many forms of anthropogenic damage to the climate. And anybody who doesn't think that there is simply not looking at reality. But on the same token, for the entire climate science community, which only looks at the carbon factor and that form of anthropogenic damage, just as much in denial, because they are omitting mathematically the single greatest disrupting factor of all, which is climate engineering. So on that note, I want to read from the Frontline Arctic Scientist post, and this is from Paul Beckwith. He's one of the AME group, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, and this is a post as of, I believe, yesterday. Our climate system is presently undergoing preliminary stages. I would argue that it's not preliminary. We're already fully descending into abrupt climate change. But he says undergoing preliminary stages of abrupt climate change. If allowed to continue, the planet climate system is quite capable of undergoing an average global temperature increase of 5 degrees C to 6 degrees C over a decade. Now, that's about 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a virtual cataclysm on Earth. Precedents for changes at such large rate can can be found at numerous times in the paleo records. This is paleoclimatic records. And those are quite accurate going back immensely far in Earth's history, by the way. I conclude, this is more quote from Paul Beckwith, I conclude that it is vital that we slash greenhouse gas emissions, no argument there, and undergo a crash program. This is where he runs off the rails completely, and undergo a crash program of climate engineering to cool the Arctic region and keep the methane in place in the permafrost and ocean sediments. Now, how long do these people have to go to school to make them so blind, to make them so incredibly willing to completely omit such an obvious and glaring truth that climate engineering has in fact been going on for 6+ decades? It is an immense part of the problem. In no way is it a part of the solution. And here we have one of the top climate scientists calling for emergency climate engineering as if it hasn't been going on for 6.5 decades and wreaking havoc on the planet. So everyone needs to be capable, again, of sifting the baby from the bathwater. A lot of the data the Arctic Methane Emergency Group puts out on what's happening on the front lines is accurate. And we have other sources of data to corroborate that. But when they start calling for emergency climate engineering, completely omitting the fact that it's going on, and I posted on their blog yet again today, my posts never make it anywhere because they screen them out, simply pleading with them to be honest. Be honest. Admit to the public that climate engineering is a reality, has been a reality, and it's a total disaster. It's killing the planet, eliminating the planet's ability to respond to the damage being done. And when will they come clean? And I'm going to post, by the way, the link where everyone can post on that blog so that everyone can rattle their cage, because quite simply their dishonesty is criminal at this point. It's absolutely criminal. So when we go to, let's look at, as these events unfold, we see the power structure being pushed further into a corner. It's getting hard to hide the fact that the climate is totally unraveling. And you still have people that look at the Fox News headlines that tell them everything from that there's WMD in Iraq to the climate's cooling to, all this mainstream media complete fallacy, for lack of a better term. But for those that are willing to look at reality, it's getting hard to hide the fact the climate's unraveling. And climate engineering is certainly fueling the fire. We have more than enough data to prove that. So while we see the latest push for creating a threat to the U.S., this ISIS, and again, ISIS is definitely a monstrous organization, but who armed them? And now we have Biden. Biden seems to be a real loose cannon. Whenever they give him a microphone, he manages to say something he wasn't supposed to. So now Biden has blamed the U.S. allies for arming the wrong people in Syria, as if that wasn't the U.S. orchestrating all of it. It's ridiculous. So those that think the power structure is infallible and doesn't make mistakes in regard to carrying out their diabolical plans, I would argue that. There's lots of mistakes being made. In fact, the more we expose them, the more pressure there will be brought to bear on them, the more dangerous they'll become, but the more mistakes they'll make as well. So we see the Ebola card being played, and any of us can guess as to which direction that will go. But I think one thing is certain, the power structure is playing that card in some manner. There's no question. That the Ebola situation could be every bit as serious as it appears to be, or perhaps it will be in some manner tapered back at some point when it's served the purpose of the power structure. We can't say yet. One thing's for sure, and I know some activists that feel afraid to communicate openly, afraid to really engage in this fight of raising awareness, that perhaps they'll be spotted by the authorities, if you will, the U.S. governmental monitoring system. And what I would say to them is, if the ship is sinking, hiding in the cabin is not going to do you any good. You're going to go down with the ship. If you want to make your voice heard, go up on the deck and make it heard. No hiding in the shadows. It won't help you. It won't help any of us. Now is the time when we all need to make our voices heard. And to the credit of many, many activists, they are making their voices heard. In fact, I want to mention Wanda Allen, who's an activist that came to this cause not so long ago. And the amount of contribution she has made in a very short time is quite astounding. And she did a presentation which I posted yesterday, which was exceptional, absolutely exceptional. A live presentation, put together very well, disseminated very well. And it's not to say that everybody can do that. Wanda obviously has some skill in that arena, and it showed. It frankly showed. But everybody can be some spoke in this wheel. Everybody can. Everybody and anybody listening could, again, be that pebble that causes the landslide of awareness to truly break loose. One is an exceptional example of this, but it doesn't mean that what other people are doing behind the scenes is any less valuable or viable. When people are, and I know a lot of these people that are now very assertively, they're sending the flaming arrows out there. With my post yesterday, I identified many of the towns that are about to run out of water in California. And if those people, activists, can help identify groups, organizations, and individuals in those towns, everybody from city councils to farm groups, ag groups, and even if there's lots of overlapping communications, the same sort of message from many activists, so much the better. To give those people heads up as to the fact that this drought is absolutely, positively not natural. We can all speculate as to the motive behind creating this drought, but the fact that it's not natural is inarguable. So I do see now a lot of activists are absolutely picking up the ball and running with it. They don't need to be directed. They're not waiting for some particular day of activism, if you will, because this is an ongoing day-to-day battle. So I salute all those activists that are now being very assertive. They're thinking about this on their own and how to affect things in their area. We're like the colonists fighting from behind rocks and trees, not organized, but very effective, very effective. How well did that work against the British, who were lined up and organized, but eventually being shot to hell from the colonists that were simply fighting from behind any cover they could, getting off a shot wherever they could, and actually doing the most damage by simply engaging every single day. Global collapse is already underway. There's no question about that. And anybody who doesn't see that needs to look a little harder. And when you watch the mainstream media, and every day you see all these supposed experts telling you about what the economy is going to be in 10 years, 20 years, and they plant these seeds where it creates this normalcy bias with people where they can't really comprehend the fact that this facade we've all lived in is disintegrating by the day. But the sooner we come to grips with that, the better chance we'll have at salvaging a reality that could possibly be maintained. And that's not this reality. And even the quote-unquote green people, environmentalists, and again, in the true sense of the word, I count myself in that category. I've lived completely off-grid for 12 years, completely. I have wind, solar, and hydro. But that's not truly green because it took technology, it took resources to create the components which allow me to live off-grid. True, it's used a lot less of the Earth's resources overall, living the way I have, but it's even renewable energy is only an energy extender. That's all. How much energy does it take to make a wind turbine? I can see 30 miles away on the mountaintops wind turbines that are 450 feet high with a blade span of almost 200 feet. These are immensely huge installations. How much energy did it take to make those, transport those, erect those, and maintain those? Quote-unquote green energy is only an energy extender. Our paradigm was never sustainable, and that is coming to a head now. But the sooner we realize that, the more chance we'll have at salvaging something that may be maintainable. But none of this is possible if we don't accomplish certain things. And at the top of that list is exposing and stopping climate engineering. And that's, again, back to what I mentioned already. A lot of activists now truly showing assertiveness with helping to spread spot fires of awareness everywhere. And just like Wanda Allen, many people are now truly doing things that are waking up people in their immediate surroundings. And all these spot fires tend to start merging into a larger blaze. So every day is a day in this fight. I salute all those that have and are putting out tremendous effort. It's all of us working together that matters. And as I've said many times before, people, I'll throw something at Greg Palin here, and he's had a long chat with Greg last night, and Greg and Russ, two men I respect immensely that have brought a lot of support into my life for enduring in this battle, and I appreciate them greatly. And both have given so much of their lives to this cause. So, and Greg for many years has put up billboards and helped with, for example, Richard Gage, who is now gaining ground finally. So it's that kind of effort I mentioned earlier, and all of that effort, so I didn't personally name. We appreciate all of you. I do, Greg does, Russ does. So, Russ, I know you're enduring a lot of spraying where you're at. We have clear skies here, but it's hotter than hell. They're spraying off the coast, massive high pressure, silvery white skies, which seems to go along with the HARP high pressure zones, where we actually see they're creating heat. And I know this because we're metering the UV. So some of the days where the spraying is not very visible, a lot of people mistake it for a non-spray day, but they are in fact spraying. So they're ionizing the atmosphere, making it more conductive, and we actually see higher UV on those days where they appear to be trying to create the high pressure, build the high pressure. So we don't have the in-your-face trails here, but you're still getting hammered there, I believe, right? And I think you said you saw a storm clear and you saw spraying overhead.
Yeah, it's kind of, they made a change in pattern about 8 weeks ago, I guess it would be now, where it looked like a war zone every single day, and then now it's select days of the month. It looks bad, but most days you don't see anything except little non-persistent trails at high altitudes. But on the days where you do see the trails, and there have been several of them in the last couple of weeks, they really just lay these huge plumes. These plumes are spread out across the sky, and especially when storm clouds. I mean, this seems to be a real pattern I hear about everywhere, and I see that here as well. The storm clouds clear, and you see all kinds of activity above the clouds. So we have a lot of that here.
Well, this is, and Greg, are you seeing down your way? I mean, I'm getting reports from all over. Same thing we see here. It appears to be a much greater effort to be more covert. I still hear about the horizon to horizon trails. There's times and situations where they can't be very covert. They're still very visible. But overall, there's been a very marked difference here as to the manner in which they're spraying. And we see them literally moving over existing aerosol clouds that they've already built up, really unleashing the spray over those clouds and then tapering it back off when they hit open air. Seeing anything like that down your way?
Definitely. We're still seeing the heavy spray days because on my way up to the cabin here on Thursday, it was just absolutely hideous. But then we're also seeing the days. I read that last night, Dane, on somebody made a comment, I think it was a guy from Washington State, that said that he was seeing it turn on and off. Basically, when it got into blue skies, it would turn off. And nothing surprises me. I have not seen that personally, but I believe that I'm sure they're doing that because they know that people are waking up because there's a whole lot more people, like you said, grabbing the ball and running with it and putting up billboards and doing what Wanda Allen did, fantastic presentations, and it's just so nice to see people awakening and spreading the word and having the courage to put themselves out there and take the risk. And in regard to what you said, Dane, it's so much riskier if most people knew the big picture. It's so much riskier to do nothing than it is to do everything you possibly can, because it literally is. It's not just your life. It's not just your family's life. It is the future of humanity at stake, It is the future of humanity at stake.
It is, and there's great solace that comes with making the decision to say, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid. I'm going to stand and make my voice heard, period. That's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's enough reason. Many people who still stand on, I know a lot of these people, on the premise that, well, it doesn't do any good, so why try? I absolutely tenaciously argue that. How can you ever know how can anybody ever know if their efforts would have done any good if they never tried? And I would argue the only failure that any of us will ever know is having not tried. That is the only failure. If you try with every bit of your being, you are stunning success, period. And for every single person we wake up matters, period. That matters in and of itself. So I would argue there is
people have to get off the sidelines, Dane. Like I've heard you say, we're trying to raise money for the billboard cause, and we don't want people to perceive this thing as in any way a money-making effort, because I've spent thousands of dollars of my own money in many different ways over the years to try to wake people up, whether it be DVDs or brochures or billboards for many different causes. And it literally is, to be selfish with your wealth, if you've accumulated any wealth at all, and there's so much wealth in this country, and that's what frustrates me the most, is that so many resources, even within my own family, and these people aren't willing to part with them. What are you saving it for? It's just maddening. It really.
On that note, I want to announce that Greg and Mary Lou, Greg's significant other, are willing to coordinate a billboard erection campaign. I hope I'm not overstepping, Greg. We talked about this, and I think you're willing. And we will try to organize this with a specific link on GeoEngineering Watch. We'll put up images of the billboards that have already been erected. And this is a great commitment by Greg, because it takes a lot of time to orchestrate this with the help of George Barnes and Skyder Alert and his nonprofit. We can get nonprofit rates, which in some cases are much, much lower than the going rate. In some cases, only 20% of the going rate. Gigantic discounts. So if people want to put up a billboard in their area, if they find the sign company, get us the data, round up the money for what the nonprofit rate is, and they can coordinate that through Greg and George, then every single penny of their money goes exactly to the sign they want and whatever location they've identified and given us the details, or given Greg the details on. So this is one method by which people can help get the word out. If there's anybody who wants large orders of DVDs, with presentations on them for exactly what the cost is, or if we can contribute some of that from our end, we will. But certainly nobody's making anything on any of this. I've gone through my entire SEP account in the last 10 years, and quite simply, the paradigm we've known is not going to matter much longer. So none of that quote unquote retirement matters to me. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be relevant very soon. So the bottom line is,
how do we get people to see that, Dane?
Well, but people can, again, aside from you organizing it or us being involved in any way, people can do this on their own. Do it on your own if you choose it. If you can get a sign company to give you the nonprofit rate, or you just need the nonprofit number or coordination with George from Skyder Alert, people in different areas can do this on their own. Write the check on your own to the sign company. Put it up on your own.
Yeah, and if you're not a nonprofit, Dane, one thing I wanted to say, even if you're not a nonprofit, I negotiated rates with Fairway Billboards. Spend time with the sales rep from your local billboard company. Get them to see the threat to their own family, children, future of humanity, and then they'll go to bat for you. I'm going to be honest, I didn't even come up with the hard work on the billboard. The last one I put up on 85 North in Atlanta, it started out on Georgia 400, and it moves around. But that guy from the billboard company did an absolutely fantastic job. When I saw it, I was like, wow, I couldn't have done a better job if I designed it myself. But he understands the gravity of the situation. He went to bat, and the rates are just as low as nonprofit rates. So you don't have to be a nonprofit to put up your own billboard. But if we could get enough people to do this, go ahead. Sorry.
No, finish, Greg. You go first.
Yeah, if we could get enough people around the country to do this, for example, my billboard I think is reaching 939,000 people a week on I-85, which is a parking lot most of the day here in Atlanta. Gosh, if we could get that in the top 10 or 20 markets across the country, you really could make a difference. I mean, in round numbers, 4 million people a month. If you could do that in 10 or 20 markets, I mean, that's big numbers. And so I can see why Richard Gage, worked so hard to get the billboards up on Times Square and such for the 9/11 Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and that's fantastic what he's accomplished. And that'd be great if we could do something similar.
It is. In fact, this is where people in any given area, if they round up their local community, identify a sign, talk to the sign company representatives personally, pass on data personally, they might not need the nonprofit numbers and so forth from George or Scott.
Exactly.
They maybe can accomplish it themselves. I had just such a conversation yesterday, as you outlined, with the rep from CBS Signs in California, who just got over cancer as a 7-year-old boy, had never heard of this issue, was profoundly interested in what I was telling him, and he wanted a couple days to try to go to management and figure out the best rate they could for us, knowing this is for the common good, and that can be accomplished anywhere. It can be accomplished anywhere. So the bottom line is, whether it's billboards or the printing up of flyers to pass out, which again, the same type of approach can be used with local printing companies if they're reached and they understand that this is to save their lives as well. A lot can be accomplished by simply communicating this issue, and you're raising the issue with yet one more person at the same time. So, Russ, can you give the phone call-in number real quick, and then when people call in, if you can want to get to as many people as we can. So if you can give us a question, we'll try to hurdle it as quick as we can and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. The call-in number, if you want to call or chat, is 718-717-8296. That's 717-8296. Just call that number. You'll be put on hold temporarily. Just keep your phone muted, and we'll call on you shortly.
And if people still, we see there's some division in different areas, and I hope people within our movement keep their focus on the goal, and that is to expose and stop climate engineering, and the recognition that climate engineering, even if we look at just that source of damage to the climate, it's enormous. Climate engineering is ripping the planet apart, bottom to top. And, when I bring up these climate scientists who, I mean, it's inexcusable. They can't be that blind to not know this is going on. And who's pulling their chains, I can't say, but they need to be held accountable. And in fact, as I mentioned in an earlier show, our local North State meteorologist, a man named Mike Kruger, who is clearly worried about his job, and I have some empathy for that, but it doesn't excuse his silence. It doesn't excuse it. When the whole ship is going down, again, he's hiding in the cabin right now, protecting his paycheck while the whole ship is going down, and that's simply not right. So now there's a public movement with a petition to demand that he address the public's concerns in this issue, because right now you have a chief meteorologist in a Channel 7 news station who is telling the news crews, don't talk to people about this issue. That's not acceptable. Absolutely not acceptable. So now we have an event in Northern California. I just scheduled it's an almost 600-seat auditorium that we'll do in November. And one of the prime purposes of this event is to organize everybody to go sit in the parking lot of that TV station until they address our issue, period. We are being literally droughted into oblivion in Northern California. The heat here is unbearable. It does not cool off at night. They will not let it rain, and everything is dying, quite simply. I mean, we know a lot of spigots in a lot of places in California no longer yield water when they're turned on. How far can we go? They have the noose around our neck. So we are trying to bring this to a head and make those quote-unquote experts accountable. They have absolutely no excuse for ducking this issue. So everyone can do that everywhere. Hold your local meteorologist accountable. And when they say this is conspiracy theory or hoax, force them onto a public debate where you can present data that they cannot refute. We have film footage of this happening. We have congressional documents. We have presidential documents, 80 pages long, going back to 1966. We have lab tests from around the globe. We have a mountain of data. And make them answer the questions. Don't be on the defensive. Be on the offensive. Make them answer the questions. Mr. Meteorologist, if this isn't going on, then why do we have film footage of it happening? Why do we have lab tests that show the exact same materials in these patents? Why do we have the top U.S. military brass stating that climate change is the greatest threat of all, and that we want to own the weather, and that we have, in fact, huge branches of the military devoted to this? Why is that if this isn't going on? Ask them the questions over and over. Make them answer you in a public forum and see how well they hold up. They can hold up. I've had radio show stations spring, in Northern California, I had them spring a, quote, government climate scientist meteorologist on me, unannounced, on a radio show that I was supposed to have the hour on. And by the end of that show, that quote-unquote government expert conceded. She didn't really know if this was going on. And that looked pretty bad to the host who tried to marginalize the issue. Looked good for our cause, and you can prevail because the facts are on our side. So, again, it's up to everybody to institute this type of assertive action in your own communities. Hold your own quote-unquote local meteorologists accountable. Make them answer you. So, Greg or Russ, I don't know what what you've seen in your particular regions of any sort of denial from local officials, but we've all seen it, right? Either one of you guys?
Yeah, we see it all the time here. I mean, we can't get anybody to to come forward and tell the truth about this issue. It's amazing the stranglehold and the coordination that comes from the top down. But the thing is that when you look at the structure of organizations like corporations, you can understand how someone in a very high position can set policy for the entire corporation. And some of these corporations own numerous media outlets. I know that Clear Channel, I looked in the state of Maine. I was looking to do contact AM radio stations in the state of Maine a few years ago. And I went looking at them, and virtually all, with just a few exceptions, all of the AM radio stations were purchased by Clear Channel a few years ago. Anybody can go look this up. Go look at these purchasing records. So it's just amazing how they have the power to squelch these news outlets, which is why alternative radio and news is so important. Right?
Well, it is. And, if you look at how incredibly without substance the denial is from some of these organizations. I did an interview with ABC, I don't know, it's been a year ago, with their chief meteorologist, Chris Edwards. And people, you can Google this. If you Google ABC completely omits climate engineering facts, you'll find a rundown on that exchange where here we have an ABC meteorologist that quote-unquote debunked he called it chemtrails because he refused to call it geoengineering because that would actually lead to fact. And his premise on quote-unquote debunking this was, one, he was in the Air Force and he says it isn't so. Well, does that really disprove anything? Two, he asked his friends at the Pentagon and they said it wasn't so. Well, that doesn't disprove much either, does it? And his third and final excuse was that they did a water test, a precipitation test, and they couldn't find anything. Well, does that really disprove a damn thing? I mean, for all we know, he ran a glass of water under a spigot and tested it. So, they don't have a leg to stand on. They don't have a leg to stand on. And in fact, people like this, and we featured him on the disinformation directory, this Chris Edwards, as we will everybody else we can find who is patently denying this reality, because they need to be held accountable as accomplices to this crime, and they need to know that we will try to make them known to the wider public for their lies so that the public holds them accountable when this comes out. Because there's no excuse. There's simply no excuse for the kind of denial we're getting from the quote-unquote experts who are supposed to be there for the common good.
What gets me, Dane, still is I'm still really frustrated with Jesse Ventura. Jesse spent several years getting a big following, and then he comes out and does this show on geoengineering and has one guy on there, doesn't talk about any of the evidence, none of the patents, none of the tests on the ground, none of the declines in insects and in animals, none of the aluminum that we're finding nothing. They just have a so-called expert on there who says, no, it's not really happening. These are just jet contrails. So it's so obvious. I'm backing up what you're saying because it's so clear to see when these people have no interest in finding truth. Anyone who really wants to find the truth can find such a preponderance of evidence that it's overwhelming. But these people don't want to find the truth.
Their job is to make sure that nobody else finds it either. We did a piece. I posted a piece on Jesse's inexcusable disinformation about this issue. Absolutely inexcusable. So whatever reason he sold out, he certainly sold out. And to have Ken Caldera, the guy who can't look you in the eye, and I know because I've met Ken, and he can't look you in the eye face to face. He'll look down, he'll look up, he'll look sideways, but he won't look you in the eye because.
Dane, can I make a point?
Yeah, please, Greg.
In regard to what you just said, I didn't want to let this get away. In regard to not looking you in the eye, one of the strangest things that ever happened when I ran for Congress 2012 was when I met Newt Gingrich, and I told him, my name's Greg Powell, I'm running for U.S. Congress in District 4 against Hank Johnson, Democratic candidate. A lot of people know Hank Johnson's history in talking about the island of Guam tipping over, literally. And that would have been Newt Gingrich's opportunity to say, good job, kid. Good luck against Hank. Somebody needs to knock him out. He did not say a word. But the main thing was he would not look you in the eye. It was the strangest thing. It was like he was looking off to the side. He never once made eye contact. Brilliant speaker. I mean, if you'd go and watch this guy speak, you'd say, wow, impressive. But when you meet him on a one-on-one and get to see what you're actually dealing with, and my point, I guess, is people are invested in this left-right paradigm. The Republicans are going to solve. I get so many emails in this regard. Next time around, we'll get a Republican in, or we'll get a new Democrat. Or it's not going to matter. I've heard people say make references to reptilians, and in dealing with Newt Gingrich, it was really, really odd. I'm just going to say that he would not look you in the eye. And he said nothing that would have been supportive, like, it's the good guys against the bad guys, and just really disheartening.
Well, it is, and I know he may be a good speaker, but I would put him in the category with the rest that have long since sold their honor completely.
Exactly. He's a globalist.
Yeah. Whatever their agenda is, it's certainly not for the common good. And for Jesse Ventura to have, that interview with Ken Caldera was very telling, because for how many minutes did Ken never once look at the camera so people could look him in the eye? And I've had communications with Caldera, and extensively so. In fact, I did post one with the Jesse Ventura piece. It was a audio recording I got from a Pacifica radio announcer friend of mine that actually quoted, you can hear Ken saying in his own voice that he used to sit at Lawrence Livermore Labs with others and devise ways of causing tidal waves with nuclear detonations and seeding clouds with pathogens. And we're supposed to believe him when he says, quote-unquote, chemtrails are a hoax, and doesn't even really go into the geoengineering term at all. And these people are absolutely without a shred of honor, and they need to be exposed and held accountable. So it's up to all of us to do that. Russ, I just sent you, or I'm sending you now, a post on the meteorologist Chris Edwards, who is like Ken Caldera. And Chris Edwards, his email contact is in this post. So perhaps people can take that and let Chris Edwards know what they think of his effort to hide this crime for the globalists.
Yeah.
And these kind of people need to be reached out to. They need to have their cages rattled constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was going to bring up about Jesse Ventura is that I started studying how disinformation works, in my spare time. Not that I have much, but once in a while, years ago. And one thing that they'll do is they'll put somebody in the public eye for years to gather a following behind them, and they save those people, that particular person, until they need to really reach out with a strong piece of disinformation. They really need to defend their position on some lie that they're promoting. And this could very well what happened with Jesse Ventura, because he did a lot of great exposés on shows that really, as much as they reached a lot of people, probably never made any difference, because they talk about Plum Island and police brutality and all these other things that may open some people's eyes, but, again, probably never made a big impact. But then to talk about the one issue that affects everybody, because we're breathing it. We're We're shortening our lives. Right now, our lives have already been shortened. This is scientifically known that the smaller the particle and the more numerous, the more it shortens your life. So they pulled him out. Very possibly this is what happened. I'm not saying I have any personal information about it, but they pulled him out at just the right time when they needed to defend this issue. And they told, here, I'm sorry, caller, we have a caller who keeps calling in, and unfortunately there's a lot of noise on the line, so I have to keep cutting them off. So please mute your phone or your Skype when you call in. You can mute your microphone. But they save these people, and then when they want to try to convince all of the people who become followers of this particular disinformant, then they come out with their big defense piece, and it fools and confuses a lot of people. And I tell people, don't be confused. Don't follow any one person. Look at the information. Look at the data. You know, it doesn't matter what Jesse Ventura says or anyone else. The truth is the truth. But anyway, that's a method I wanted to mention, so people are wise about how sophisticated they are in disinforming the public.
Russ, you bring up a great point, and I've tried to send personal responses back to a lot of people that will post a question that they've seen a headline, and now they're off and running a certain direction, and then they want to ask the question, is this true or not? And my response to them back is, look for yourself. Don't react from a headline that you don't even investigate. We have to investigate this stuff. Again, it's like the what I mentioned earlier in the AMA group, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group. What their warnings about how dire the Arctic methane situation is are accurate. In fact, I would say they're less than accurate only in this sense. The situation is more dire than they describe. But then when they call for emergency wartime scale geoengineering, that's where they run off the rails. But people have to be educated enough to sift through that. So it's up to all of us to learn a little bit about the situation, not react off a headline. And when we take a position, we have to have some basis for that position. We have to have taken our compass heading, as I brought up before. We have to do that. And a lot of people have adopted a conclusion from whatever headline they saw at the very beginning of this battle, and they've never bothered to take their compass heading since. They have an ideology that's guiding them, not facts, not reality, just simply what they choose to believe based on perhaps not liking certain aspects of the equation or again, the power structure in general, because none of us like the power structure. But that doesn't mean if the power structure or one of their media outlets or one of their spokesmen says the world is round, that we have to then take the position that the world is flat. That doesn't make sense. So we all have to be able to decipher reality out of the equation, and you need to know a little bit before you can do that. And also with passing on data, again, that's where the flyers are so helpful. And people can download these, and back to the earlier conversation, if you go to a local printer, explain the situation, explain how dire it is, explain that you're paying with this with your own money, as we've all done, and that can they help get this done cheaper because you're doing this to literally try to save the planet and everyone on it. You can get a lot of help from people. And having a flyer to pass on to somebody is so immensely more productive than in long ranting conversation people don't remember. It's not the key to the door. Long rants and very tense and emotional rants are not the key to the emotional door at all. Passing on a good, credible informational flyer without a lot of dialogue, this is going on, the media's not reporting it, it affects us all drastically, please look, that works.
Plus, I would invite people to go to the chat room that's live right now at ucy.tv. It's the letters ucy.tv. Go to the Geoengineering Watch radio page, and I'm going to post a link there to an article that shows you how you can get flyers printed for free when you talk to your local printer. Plus, we have a caller. You want to take a caller now, Dane?
Yeah, Russ, let's go with that.
Caller with your phone number ends in 30. You're on. How are you doing? Caller with your phone number that ends in 30. You're with us right now. Hi there. How are you doing?
Hi, this is Dal in Nicaragua. How are you?
Good. I'm sorry, this is Dal. Give your name again?
Yeah, I'm Dal in Nicaragua. I'm a regular listener.
Oh, hi, Dal. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for your show. I appreciate listening every weekend. I have a brief question, and it stems back to when I used to watch Believers Underground years ago, and the fellow there, Scott Owen, he posted something on YouTube and it was due to samples that were taken in California where they discovered actual erythrocytes, which, as you know, are red blood cells. And they discovered live red blood cells in the samples, and the YouTube video was taken down right after that. So I'm extremely, extremely interested in that subject, whether there are actually red blood cells in what they're spraying on us. And I appreciate your answer. I'll hang up and listen to your response off the air. Thank you for your time.
Before you go,
Yeah.
if the event you're speaking about happened some time ago, if I'm correct, the actual event.
I'm saying 6 years.
Yes, that's what I thought. I've seen that. I know the video was taken down. This is all I can say is I have not been involved in any testing that specifically looked for or showed such contamination, but Clifford Carnicom and his institution have. Clifford is a very intelligent and very thorough researcher. I believe his data. I believe it's credible. I have personally witnessed on one occasion, I spent time in the wilderness behind, my residence is surrounded by wilderness, I'm in the middle of it, but on a mountaintop in a winter night, while I was observing the skies, a very rare blanket of low-lying fog over the city of Redding, California, I personally witnessed KC-135 flew right over my head, right down on the deck, 6,000 feet up, absolutely dumping something. I mean, this had nothing to do with weather modification. It was leaving a massive plume, and of course, not visible to the city because of this rare blanket of fog that we don't have very much in this area. Now, I don't pretend to know what that was about. I had no way of taking any kind of sample, but I will say that officially, even according to the mainstream newspaper sources in our area, 49% of this city and its residents are now contaminated with MRSA. 49%. 46% are chronically ill. So I don't think there's any doubt that there's biological experimentation going on. We would be absolutely naive to believe there's not. So your question is valid. I'm familiar with that video, and I know it was taken down, but people can look at Clifford Carnicom's data for that research. But thank you for bringing it up, and it's an important point. With the Ebola going on, we know about all the spraying. We know how toxic the elements we've identified are. We know that. But we can't know what we're not looking for. And this existing spray mechanism or this global spraying structure can and may already be putting who knows what in our air column that may be directly linked to the spread of many pathogens already. So
Dane, let's not forget the fact that our source within the program used the term air pharmacology.
Correct. And let's also remember what I just brought up about Ken Caldera, talking about what he and his colleagues talked about at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, how they could spread pathogens into clouds. So, again, what we face is the epitome of insanity. It's a threat that cannot be fully quantified. It's immediate. People simply have to rise to the occasion. Don't hide in your cabin. Get up on the deck. Help us in this fight now. Thank you for the question. Great question.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, thank you. And
we can, as long as we're all aware that, any medium, any fluid pretty much could carry any form of toxin all the way from polio to Ebola to you name it. Your list is longer than mine. So thank you for your response.
Well, thank you for the question. And I'll bring up one more aspect of this too. We have, and I posted an article on this as well, E. coli bacteria has been named in research papers experimenting with biological ice-nucleating agents, artificial nucleating agents. E. coli was named as a constituent that could be used for this. Popular Science published, and perhaps without realizing what they had disclosed, that they were finding E. coli bacteria at 33,000 feet in the clouds, and they couldn't figure out how the heck it got there. So, again, we can only guess at what they're spreading in the atmosphere right now. There are no limits to what they will do, and the mix is certainly quite lethal. So, back to the battle at hand. We simply must expose climate engineering. If we could, a lot of other things would be brought to the surface with it.
I would back
Thanks for the call.
Yeah, great call.
Or the enterovirus. I'll hang up now.
Correct. Enterovirus as well. I mean, that certainly could be a part of these programs as well. And at minimum, we know these elements we're exposed to are weakening our immune systems radically by the day. So you combine that with what they may be adding to the mix too. It's a very lethal brew.
Yeah, besides the fact, I mean, the barium and aluminum both suppress the immune system. Plus, there's a particular plume type that when they disperse it here, I went through this in Maine many times. If they disperse it 3 days in a row, everybody starts getting sick. If they disperse it a week in a row, it gets real serious. And one time they did a couple weeks in a row, and they shut down schools. Everybody had the flu. And of course they say, oh, well, it's just going around. The thing is, it's airborne. It's always associated with a particular type of plume. And it's very interesting. And that particular type of plume always makes me wake up with a sore throat. I have a lot of reports from people who report the same thing. Caller with your phone number that ends in 10. You're live. Who are we talking with?
Yeah, hey guys, Dane in Rochester, New York.
Hi, Dan.
How are you guys today?
Yeah, thanks for calling.
How are you all today?
Good, thanks.
Good. Hey, just listen, in regard to the previous caller, Russ, if you remember, about a year ago, I ended up having the fortune of listening to your show that you had with Clifford Carnicon, and I ended up calling in, and I ended up joining his institute as a volunteer. And the thing that I've been doing with him is I've read pretty much every single one of his papers that he's written. And my function with him has been to summarize his papers into abstracts that contain, I think, pretty accurate summaries of the research work that Clifford's done. So if the previous caller is still listening, you can go to carniconinstitute.org, and you should be able to find the abstracts and the papers that Clifford actually did write. And yes, there have been erythrocytes found, and he's done a tremendous amount of research as far as what those are, what they do to the body, et cetera. And it's related to Morgellons. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but that is a very good point. It's really scary stuff. And as a matter of fact, Dane, you're talking about the bacteria and things in the atmosphere. And some of the research that I've done has shown that the aluminum being sprayed in the atmosphere, when the sun hits it and warms it up, it actually is a food source for bacteria, viruses, and such things. It's pretty crazy stuff, and that's how those pathogens, biologicals, actually explode in volume because they're able to reproduce from having such a massive amount of food source. So anyway, I have a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead.
No, you first. You first.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions, and it's maybe a little off topic, a tiny bit from what you guys are talking about. But Dane, I'm wondering, as far as your knowledge, knowing people like Caldera and these guys, how accessible are these people? And when I say that, do they own homes? Do they typically walk out of their houses and get into their cars and drive to work? And the reason I ask that, I'm just wondering, why doesn't anybody ever confront these people? I don't understand. Politicians get confronted, or athletes, or all these different people, but it never seems like these very people who are really problematic in these areas, it doesn't seem like we don't see YouTube videos of Ken Caldera having somebody get in his face and say, why are you doing this?
It needs to happen more.
You can answer, do you know?
They are accessible. It needs to happen more. There was some confrontation, peaceful but firm, at the science conference in San Diego with David Keith, and this was the direct exchange I had with geoengineer David Keith. Ken Caldera was there as well, and that particular back and forth with Keith has gotten a lot of airtime, where Keith answered my question, one of only three they allowed in a whole room full of journalists, that in fact no study had been done in his proposal of dumping 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere, and that exchange has haunted him for a lot of years. So if people choose to confront David Keith or Ken Caldera or those like them, one, do it non-aggressively. You can do it firmly but not aggressively. Do not do it in a threatening manner. That does not help our cause. And two, film it. Film it for sure. If there's no point in doing it if you can't record it. So, and these people are very, very sensitive. In fact, email exchanges I've had with Ken Caldera, and his website published his personal address, and he felt that threatened his children. And I was able to get the webmaster to in that particular case, not for the sake of Ken Caldera, but for his children, to take that address down. But these people are accessible. Ken Caldera, anybody can look up his email address at Stanford, anybody. And I encourage the exchange with him. In fact, a bioscientist from Stanford University, whom I know, had an email exchange with David Keith that was quite telling. We still have that on record. And Keith was still, several years after the fact, lamenting about this exchange I had with him. And his quote to this bioscientist about me was, "Dane doesn't play fair." What's not fair about asking a question, David, Keith, that you have an inadequate answer for? So these people are accessible. They should be confronted. And look what Stephen Colbert did with David Keith. Colbert was absolutely brilliant. So, yes, they should be sought out. They should be questioned. They should be confronted in a non-aggressive manner, and put on film. So that's a very valid approach. And, you're right to bring it up. And we are trying to post the emails for these people so the public at large can start to rattle their cage and make it clear that it's not okay what they're doing. And everybody should make it clear. So your point's well taken.
Right. Yeah, well, I agree 100%. I under no circumstances would I ever advocate any kind of a non-peaceful confrontation. But that's a great answer. I would, if the guy lived in Rochester where I live, I'd be in his driveway in the morning just saying, "Good morning, can I talk to you for a few minutes?"
This needs to be done.
You just don't see this stuff.
There you go.
Absolutely.
And film it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and film it.
Yes.
That's the most important part. Put them on film. So, and they don't think they're... Go ahead.
I had one more question. Again, it's a little bit off the beaten path here, but there was just the announcement a couple of weeks ago about another super secret military satellite being launched into the atmosphere. And I've read a tremendous amount about the damage that these rockets do to the ozone, especially, and even the fuel they use can't be helping the atmosphere in general. They talk about CO2 in these things, and the fuels that they use in these rockets are just horrifyingly caustic to an awful lot of things. Do you ever come across any estimation? I'm going to drop off after this question, but do you ever come across any estimations of how much damage these rockets across the planet when they all get launched do damage to ozone and such things?
But for all, in a very simplistic sense, they're blowing a hole in the atmosphere. And for every pound of hydrocarbon burned at altitude, all these jets, not only are they dispersing this toxic material, which is shredding the ozone and poisoning all of us, disrupting all the weather, but for every fuel of hydrocarbon they burn at altitude, it produces something on the order of 20 pounds of CO2. So just the activity of the aircraft alone is usually decimating, let alone all the spraying they're doing. So all the above. I mean, this paradigm we are in is literally by the day diminishing any chances any of us have for long-term survival, even short-term survival. So all of us need to get up to speed and sound the alarm. But thanks for all the points you brought up. I mean, these are all excellent points.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much. If you want to squeeze one more in, we've got 90 seconds. Caller with your number that ends in 12. How are you doing today?
Hey, how's it going? This is Ty from East Texas.
Hi, Ty. How are you, buddy? What's your question? We got it just a few seconds.
I just wanted to share with y'all real quick some alarming things that have been going on. Tuesday, we probably had our day with the most GeoEngineering. We just absolutely got hammered. Big trails with big shadows, planes flying back, leaving trails through skies. Then Thursday, we probably got one of the worst storms we've gotten.
Yeah, everybody's getting hammered, Ty. I don't mean to rush you. If you have a question, better do it fast because we're just about to go off the air.
Okay. Last night, my kids called me outside to tell me that, there was a plane flying. As soon as darkness ended, we seen two planes in the sky right above our house, very low flying, looked like cotton candy, about that color. As soon as darkness set in. Have you guys ever experienced something like this?
I've been on the coast before when the marine layer comes in and planes that are right above the deck. So in that case, enhancing the marine layer. But for everybody that's listening, Ty, thanks for bringing that up. Everybody's getting hammered. Russ, I'll let you close things out. But for everybody that's listening, every day matters. Help us in the fight. Do it effectively and efficiently. Russ?
This is Geoengineering Watch Radio every 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 noon, or 12 noon Pacific Time at ucy.tv. Join us next week. On behalf of Dane Wigington and Greg Palin, this is Russ Tanner. We'll see you next week. Thank you.